The helicopter's rotors cut through the morning silence of Riverside Heights like a blade through silk. Children pressed their faces to apartment windows. Mothers clutched coffee cups on fire escapes. And in the center of the small community park, a sleek black aircraft touched down on grass that had never seen anything more exotic than a pickup basketball game. But this story doesn't begin with the helicopter. It begins 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning when Sophia Sterling had exactly 18 minutes to change her life forever. The elevator climbed toward the 42nd floor of Morrison Biomedical Tower, and with each passing floor, Sophia Sterling felt her heart rate spike higher. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed what 5 years of clawing her way up the corporate ladder had cost her. Sharp cheekbones that used to be soft curves, dark circles under eyes that once sparkled with dreams instead of spreadsheet data, and a designer blazer that cost more than her father's monthly rent. At 35, Sophia was the youngest senior research associate in Morrison Biomedical's history. Today, she would either become the youngest research director or watch her career plateau forever. The presentation folder in her hands contained 18 months of groundbreaking research on emergency medical response protocols, countless sleepless nights, and her only shot at the promotion that would finally lift her family out of the financial quicksand they'd been drowning in since her mother Maria's death. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father, David. "Knock 'em dead, sweetheart. Mom would be so proud." Sophia's throat tightened. David still works 60-hour weeks at the warehouse, his engineering degree gathering dust in a frame beside their kitchen table. He'd given up his career dreams to raise her alone after Maria's heart gave out at 42. Too young, too sudden, too unfair. The medical bills had consumed their savings. The grief had consumed everything else. The elevator dinged. 42nd floor, executive conference room. 7 board members, including CEO Isabella Morrison. One chance. But first, Sophia needed coffee. Real coffee. Not the swill from the break room. She had 15 minutes before her presentation. Just enough time to hit the cafe across the street and collect herself. As she waited for the elevator to descend, her colleague Kevin Sullivan stepped in beside her. Tall, polished, and perpetually smug, Kevin had joined the company 2 years after Sophia, but somehow always managed to position himself for the spotlight. "Big day today, Sterling," Kevin said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nervous about the presentation?" "Just confident," Sophia replied, though something in his tone set her on edge. "Good. The board moved the meeting up to 9 sharp, by the way. Hope you're ready." Sophia's blood chilled. "What?" "It was scheduled for 9:15. Kevin shrugged. "Last-minute change. CEO's orders." He stepped off at the lobby. "See you up there." 8:57. Sophia had exactly 3 minutes. The October wind bit through her blazer as she stepped onto Madison Avenue, her mind racing. Something felt wrong about Kevin's casual announcement, but she didn't have time to process it. Her heels clicked against concrete in a frantic rhythm as she hurried toward the building entrance. That's when she saw her. The woman slumped against the brick wall of Patterson's Delicatessen wasn't supposed to be part of any plan. At first glance, Sophia almost rushed past. Just another New York morning scene, easily ignored. But something in the woman's posture stopped her cold. "Excuse me?" Sophia's voice came out breathless from her rush. "Are you all right?" The woman's head lifted slowly, and Sophia's world tilted. Even through the obvious distress, she recognized those features from company newsletters and Forbes magazine covers. Isabella Morrison, CEO of Morrison Biomedical, the woman whose approval could make or break careers, whose signature appeared on Sophia's paychecks. Isabella's lips were grotesquely swollen. Her throat showed the telltale rash of a severe allergic reaction. And her breathing, God, her breathing sounded like air being forced through a collapsed straw. "Help," Isabella whispered, the word barely audible. "Can't breathe." Sophia's phone screen blazed. 8:59 a.m. 1 minute until her presentation. 1 minute to get back upstairs, set up her laptop, and deliver the performance of her lifetime. Isabella's hands shot out with surprising strength, gripping Sophia's wrist. Banana, smoothie, she gasped. Allergic, anaphylaxis. Sophia's mind raced through half-remembered biology classes, mandatory workplace safety training, the swelling throat, the hives creeping up Isabella's neck, the wheezing breaths that were getting shallower by the second. The street was eerily empty for downtown Manhattan. Early morning commuters had already disappeared into office buildings. The few pedestrians who passed seemed to actively avoid looking their way. New York's practiced indifference in full display. Stay with me. Sophia dropped to her knees beside Isabella, her designer suit meeting dirty concrete. I'm going to help you. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. I need an ambulance at Madison and 47th. A woman is having a severe allergic reaction. Her airway is closing. Ma'am, we have units en route. Stay on the line. I can't stay, Sophia interrupted, her voice cracking. There's a pharmacy 2 blocks north. She needs epinephrine now, or she's going to die. Sophia dropped the phone and ran. She'd never been athletic. Her gym membership was for show, her running shoes pristine. But now she sprinted like someone's life depended on it. Because it did. The pharmacist at Henderson's Emergency Care, his name tag read Ron, took one look at Sophia's desperate face and moved without question. Anaphylaxis? Yes, it's my boss. She can't breathe. Please. Ron's hands moved with practiced efficiency, pulling an epinephrine auto-injector from the locked cabinet. Do you know how to administer this? Outer thigh. Hold for 10 seconds. The words came automatically. Yes, I know. The run back felt eternal. Sophia's lungs burned, her heels catching in sidewalk cracks. Her mind kept conjuring worst-case scenarios. Arriving too late, finding the street corner empty except for the ghost of a choice that came too late. But Isabella was still there, barely. Her breathing had deteriorated to a thin whistle. Her lips were taking on a blue tinge that made Sophia's stomach drop. I'm here, Sophia gasped, falling to her knees beside Isabella. I've got the EpiPen. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. In training, they'd use practice dummies, classroom demonstrations with no real stakes. This was different. This was life and death, and Sophia was the only thing standing between them. She positioned the auto-injector against Isabella's thigh, right through the expensive suit pants. Please work. The click seemed impossibly loud in the quiet morning. Sophia held it there, counting in her head. 1, 2, 3. Isabella's face was gray. 4, 5, 6. Was it supposed to take this long? 7, 8, 9. What if she'd done it wrong? 10. She pulled the injector away. For one terrible, endless moment, nothing happened. Then Isabella gasped, a deep, ragged, beautiful inhale, and her eyes flew open. Sophia sat back on her heels, suddenly aware that moisture was blurring her vision, that her whole body was shaking, that sirens were wailing in the distance. Isabella's hand found hers and squeezed weakly. Thank you, she whispered. Sophia looked down at her phone screen. 9:18 a.m. 18 minutes after her presentation had started. 18 minutes past the point of no return. The paramedics arrived like cavalry in blue uniforms, moving with efficient calm. They stabilized Isabella, loaded her onto a stretcher, asked Sophia questions she answered automatically while her brain tried to process what she'd just done, what she just lost. As they wheeled Isabella toward the ambulance, the CEO reached out and grabbed Sophia's hand one more time. Her eyes were clearer now, focused and intense. What's your name? Isabella asked. Sophia Sterling. Sophia Sterling. Isabella's eyes glistened with tears. I'm never going to forget that name. The walk back to Morrison Tower felt like a funeral march. Each step carried Sophia further away from the life she'd planned and deeper into a future she couldn't fathom. The October leaves scattered across the sidewalk seemed to mock her. Autumn colors, the season of change, of things dying to make room for something new. The security guard in the lobby looked at her with confusion. "Ms. Sterling, I thought you were in the board meeting." "I was delayed." Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor stretched forever. When the doors opened, the conference room was empty except for cleaning staff collecting coffee cups and the remnants of what should have been her triumph. Sophia found her supervisor, Janet Kim, in her office. Janet looked up from her computer with an expression Sophia had never seen before. Disappointment mixed with something that might have been pity. "Sophia." Janet's voice was carefully neutral. "We need to talk." "I can explain." The board waited 20 minutes. 20 minutes, Sophia. "Do you understand what that means? The CFO flew in from London specifically for your presentation. We had to tell them our presenter simply didn't show up." Sophia's legs felt weak. She sank into the chair across from Janet's desk. There was an emergency, a medical emergency. Someone was dying. I don't doubt that. But this was your career, Sophia. This was everything we've been working toward for 5 years. The promotion is going to Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan. The man who'd somehow known about the time change when she hadn't. The man who took credit for her research in department meetings. The man who would now be making twice her salary while she remained trapped in middle management forever. "I saved someone's life," Sophia whispered. "I know." Janet's expression softened slightly. "And that says something about your character. But character doesn't pay the bills, Sophia. Results do. Performance does. Showing up does." Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from David. "How did it go? Ready to celebrate?" She stared at the message until the words blurred together. How was she going to tell him? How was she going to explain that she'd thrown away everything they'd worked for? Over the next 2 weeks, Sophia discovered just how quickly corporate sympathy evaporated. Kevin Sullivan settled into the director role with visible satisfaction, making changes to her protocols and taking credit for innovations she'd developed. Worse, she began noticing discrepancies in the research files, sections of her work that had somehow found their way into Kevin's previous presentations, dating back months. "I've been thinking about your emergency response protocols," Kevin said during a department meeting, presenting slides that looked suspiciously familiar. "These innovations could revolutionize our approach to crisis intervention." Sophia sat in stunned silence as Kevin outlined her own research, her own breakthrough insights, as if they were his original concepts. When she tried to speak up, Kevin smoothly redirected the conversation. "Of course, I had some input from the team," he said with a dismissive wave. "But the core innovation was developing this integrated approach rather than isolated responses." That night, Sophia stayed late in the office, digging through archived files and email threads. What she found made her stomach turn. Kevin had been systematically accessing her research files for months, copying her work and repositioning it as his own preliminary concepts. He'd built his entire promotion case on her innovations. At home, David tried to stay positive. "Maybe it's a blessing in disguise," he'd say, over their dinner of microwave leftovers. "Maybe something even better's coming." But they both knew the truth. In corporate America, there were no participation trophies. Miss your shot, and the ladder you'd been climbing for 5 years suddenly had all its rungs above you sawed off. The financial pressure was suffocating. Sophia's salary barely covered their expenses as it was. The promotion would have meant a 40% raise, enough to finally start paying down the medical debt, enough for David to maybe consider going back to school, enough to breathe. Instead, they were drowning all over again. Sophia stopped sleeping well. She'd lie awake replaying those crucial minutes, searching for some alternative timeline where she could have saved Isabella and made it to her presentation. Some magical solution that didn't require choosing between someone's life and her own future. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isabella's blue lips and heard that desperate whisper, "Help." She'd made the right choice. She knew that, but knowing it didn't make the consequences any easier to bear. By the third Saturday after the incident, Sophia had almost made peace with her new reality, almost convinced herself that doing the right thing was its own reward, even if that reward came with a side of financial ruin and career stagnation. And then she heard the helicopter. The sound started as a distant hum, easily dismissed as traffic or construction. But it grew louder, closer, until the windows in their Riverside Heights apartment were rattling and David was jumping up from the couch where he'd been reading the newspaper. "What the hell?" he muttered, moving to the window. Sophia joined him, and they both watched in disbelief as a sleek black helicopter descended toward the small community park directly across from their building. Within seconds, every resident was rushing outside. Mrs. Patterson from upstairs, the Rodriguez family from the first floor, even old Mr. Kim, who usually never left his recliner. Everyone gathered on the sidewalk, staring as the helicopter touched down on grass, its rotors kicking up leaves and debris in a dramatic swirl. David put a protective arm around Sophia. "Stay close to me." The helicopter door opened and Sophia's heart stopped. Stepping out, looking healthy and polished, and completely transformed from the dying woman on a street corner, was Isabella Morrison. She wore an elegant cream-colored suit, her dark hair styled perfectly, sunglasses perched on her head. She looked like someone who belonged on magazine covers, not in their struggling neighborhood where helicopters never ever landed. Isabella's eyes scanned the crowd of gawking residents, and when they landed on Sophia, her face broke into a smile that could have powered the whole building. She walked directly toward them, and the crowd parted instinctively. "Sophia Sterling?" Isabella asked, though her expression said she already knew the answer. Sophia couldn't speak, could barely nod. "My name is Isabella Morrison." She glanced at David, taking in his protective stance, the resemblance in their features. "You must be her father. I can see where she gets her courage." David's arm tightened around Sophia. "What's this about?" Isabella turned back to Sophia, and her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "3 weeks ago, this young woman saved my life, and I've spent every day since trying to understand what happened that morning." The crowd pressed closer, whispers rippling through the residence. Sophia felt like she was floating outside her body, watching this scene happen to someone else. "After I was released from the hospital," Isabella continued, her voice carrying easily in the stunned silence, "I had my security team pull every piece of surveillance footage from that morning. I wanted to know who had stopped when everyone else kept walking." She paused, and Sophia could feel every eye on them. "What I discovered broke my heart. Sophia, you didn't just miss any meeting. You missed the most important presentation of your career. You sacrificed a promotion you'd earned through 5 years of exemplary work to save a stranger's life." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Sophia heard Mrs. Patterson gasp, heard someone say, "That's why she looked so upset that day." David's voice was barely a whisper. "You did that for her?" "I couldn't just leave her, Dad," Sophia said, the same words she'd been telling herself for 3 weeks. "No, you couldn't," Isabella agreed, having heard the exchange. "Because that's who you are, and that's exactly why I'm here." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, but she didn't open it yet. "I also discovered something else during my investigation, something that made me very angry." Isabella's voice took on a steel edge. "Kevin Sullivan, your colleague who received the promotion meant for you, had been systematically stealing your research for months." Sophia's breath caught. "You know about that?" "I know everything. The copied files, the plagiarized innovations, the way he positioned your breakthrough protocols as his own preliminary work. Isabella's eyes flashed. I know he somehow learned about my severe banana allergy through his girlfriend in HR, and I know he deliberately told you the wrong meeting time that morning. The crowd had gone dead silent. David's grip on Sophia tightened. He set you up, Isabella continued. He knew that if you encountered someone in medical distress, your character wouldn't let you walk away. He was counting on exactly what happened, that you'd miss your presentation and he'd get your promotion by default. Sophia felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. But how could you possibly know all that? Isabella smiled grimly. Because when a CEO nearly dies, she tends to take corporate security very seriously. My team is extremely thorough. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. I need to tell you 4 things, Sophia Sterling. Isabella held up one finger. First, Kevin Sullivan was terminated yesterday morning. Plagiarism and corporate sabotage are grounds for immediate dismissal. Sophia's knees went weak. David's arm was the only thing keeping her upright. Second, Isabella held up another finger. The Morrison Biomedical Board has unanimously agreed to offer you the research director position, not as compensation for what you lost, but because your work, your actual work, is revolutionary. That's not possible, Sophia stammered. Third, Isabella continued, I'm establishing an education fund for your father. David Sterling deserves the chance to finish what he started. Full tuition for engineering graduate school at Columbia. It's time for him to reclaim his dreams. David made a sound like he'd been punched in the gut. And fourth, Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion, I'd like to be part of your lives, if you'll let me. Your daughter didn't just save my life that morning. She reminded me what true character looks like, what real courage means. Sophia was crying now, full-body sobs that shook her shoulders. Around them, the crowd had gone completely silent, many of them tearing up as well. Why? Sophia finally managed to ask. Why would you do all this? Isabella stepped closer and gently cupped Sophia's face. Because that morning, I lay on that street corner for 15 minutes before you came along. 15 minutes of watching people walk past. Some of them looked right at me and kept going. A businessman stepped over me like I was debris. A jogger crossed the street to avoid me. Her voice broke. I was going to die there alone because no one cared enough to stop. And then you stopped. You didn't know who I was. You had every reason to keep walking, more reason than anyone else because you had the most to lose. But you stopped anyway. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Isabella continued. I've lived for 45 years. I've built a company worth hundreds of millions. I've met presidents and celebrities and people who are supposed to be special. And in all that time, I've never met anyone as truly extraordinary as you. Sophia Sterling. She stepped back and addressed the crowd, her voice stronger now. This is what a hero looks like. Not someone in a cape or a uniform, just a woman who chose compassion when it cost her everything. The crowd erupted in applause. Spontaneous, thunderous applause that echoed off the apartment buildings. Mrs. Patterson was crying. Mr. Rodriguez was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. The teenagers who usually lounged in the parking lot were cheering, and Sophia stood there, held by her father, unable to believe that the worst moment of her life had somehow transformed into the best. That evening, after the helicopter had departed and the neighborhood had returned to its normal, quiet chaos, Sophia sat with David at their small kitchen table, the same table where he'd comforted her 3 weeks ago. The same table where they'd shared countless meals and homework sessions and conversations about dreams that seemed impossible. I can't believe this is real, Sophia whispered, staring at the folder Isabella had left behind, full of job contracts, enrollment paperwork, and a personal check for $15,000 to cover immediate expenses. David was still processing it all, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. You know what your mother would say about today? David asked finally. Sophia looked up at him, waiting. She'd say that the universe has a way of rewarding those who choose love over fear. His eyes welled with tears. She'd be so proud of you, sweetheart, so incredibly proud. She'd be proud of you too, Dad. You taught me to be brave. You showed me how to keep going when things are hard. David squeezed her hand across the table. Your mother used to say that success isn't about climbing the ladder. It's about how many hands you reach down to pull up behind you. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Morrison Biomedical Tower. But this time she wasn't nervous. This time she belonged there. As the new research director, she'd revolutionized the company's approach to emergency medical response. Her first initiative had been the Sterling Protocol, a company-wide mandate that no employee would ever be penalized for stopping to help someone in medical distress. Her second had been implementing whistleblower protections for research integrity. Isabella had become more than a mentor. She'd become family. She attended David's graduation from Columbia with his master's in engineering. She was there for Sophia's housewarming party when they moved to a better apartment in Manhattan. She was there for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations and all the quiet moments in between. David had taken a position as senior project manager at Morrison Biomedical, working alongside his daughter to develop the next generation of life-saving devices. His eyes had regained their spark, his laughter had returned, and for the first time since Maria's death, he talked about the future with hope instead of resignation. The evening before the one-year anniversary of their meeting, Sophia, David, and Isabella sat in Sophia's new apartment, the one with windows that overlooked Central Park, the one she could afford because she'd finally climbed high enough up the ladder to breathe. I've been thinking about that morning, Isabella said, swirling her wine thoughtfully, about all the things that had to align perfectly for our paths to cross. The banana smoothie, David said with a slight smile. He'd heard this story dozens of times now, but he never tired of it. The banana smoothie, Isabella agreed. I stopped at a new cafe on my way to an early meeting. Never thought to ask about ingredients. Should have known better. I've avoided bananas my whole life after a reaction as a child. But you forgot, Sophia said softly. I forgot. And 10 minutes after I drank that smoothie, I couldn't breathe. I tried to get help. I really tried. But everyone just kept walking. Isabella's voice caught. I watched at least 20 people pass by before you showed up. Some of them looked right at me. One man actually stepped around me like I was an obstacle on the sidewalk. That's horrible, Sophia whispered. That's reality, Isabella said. We live in a world where people are so focused on their own lives, their own problems, their own schedules, that they forget to see each other. And I was going to die because of it. She reached over and took Sophia's hand. But then you didn't keep walking. You had more to lose than anyone else who passed me that morning. You had a presentation that would determine your entire future. You had every excuse to keep going, but you stopped anyway. I couldn't not stop, Sophia said. I kept thinking, what if that was Mom? What if someone had walked past her when she needed help? I just couldn't. David's eyes filled with moisture once again. Your mother would be so proud of you, of all of us. She would be proud, Isabella added, of David for raising a daughter who understands what really matters, of Sophia for having the courage to act on it. And maybe if she's watching, she'd be happy that her family found someone else to love who loves them just as much. It was the first time Isabella had acknowledged what had been growing between them all year. Not romantic love between her and David, though there were certainly lingering glances and gentle touches, but something deeper. The love of chosen family, the love of people who had saved each other in ways that went far beyond that October morning. A year later, Sophia stood at the podium of the Morrison Biomedical Annual Shareholders Meeting. delivering the keynote address about the company's record-breaking year. But more importantly, she was announcing the launch of the Morrison Sterling Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to training first responders and educating the public about emergency medical intervention. In the audience, David sat next to Isabella, both of them beaming with pride. Sophia's presentation was flawless, her confidence unshakable, her message clear. Success meant nothing if you achieved it by stepping over people who needed help. After the applause died down and the crowd began to disperse, Isabella caught up with Sophia backstage. "Your mother would have loved today," Isabella said, pulling Sophia into a hug. "I know," Sophia replied. "I finally understand what she meant about kindness being an investment. I invested in a stranger that morning, and the returns have been beyond anything I could have imagined." "That's the thing about compassion," Isabella smiled. "It's the only currency that multiplies when you give it away." As they walked out of the conference center together, two women who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who had built something beautiful from a moment of crisis. Sophia thought about the choice she'd made that October morning. She'd thought she was choosing between her future and a stranger's life, but in reality she'd been choosing between a future she'd planned and a future she'd never dared to dream. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best. Sometimes saving someone else is the same thing as saving yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, justice arrives in a helicopter and everything changes. Because in the end, the test Sophia passed that morning wasn't in any boardroom. It was on a street corner where she had seconds to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. She chose kindness, and the universe chose her right back. Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? Maybe it wasn't as dramatic as Sophia's story, but we all have those moments where we decide between our own convenience and someone else's need. The moments that define who we really are. And sometimes those moments of sacrifice become the greatest investments we'll ever make.